Hey everyone, welcome to Adventures in Angular, the podcast where we keep you updated on all things Angular related. This show is produced by two companies, Top End Devs and Unvoid. Top End Devs is where we create top end devs who get top end pay and recognition while working on interesting problems and making meaningful community contributions. And Unvoid, which provides remote design and software development services on a task basis. So clients only pay after tasks are delivered and approved. My name is Lucas Paganini. I'm your host in the podcast. And joining me in today's episode is Jason Akbar, which is a full stack software engineer, mainly focused on front end. And by the way, for the companies hearing this out there, Jason is currently looking for another role. So if you're hiring or your company is hiring for Angular or React, be sure to check out Jason Akbar. So, Jason, thanks for being at the show.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. You're very welcome. So, Jason, the reason why you're here is because you wrote a few articles on Medium, and one of those articles was about RxJS operators. And that was one that caught
Yes.
our attention, and we thought it would be interesting to bring that knowledge to the rest of the audience. So maybe you
Okay.
could talk a little bit more about the article that you wrote and what was the intention behind it? Like what were you trying to educate people about?
Okay. So before I wrote the article, I didn't know much about RxJS, and then I wanted to do more research on it to figure out the operators and how they can just make my work easier and more streamlined, because I realized there are so many things I didn't need to do myself that RxJS just makes easier for you. So after I was done with my research, I just decided to write an article on it so that people would find the information they need on RxJS easier that I had to find it. So that was the intention behind writing the article.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. And by the way, I I understand what you mean by that because I also had a few challenges on my own when I was going through my learning journey of RxJS. I would say it was definitely
Okay.
not super easy. And I remember that there was one website in particular. I think it was called Learn RxJS, if I recall correctly. I can check. But I believe it was Learn RxJS, which had some really nice diagrams for each of the operators. And that helped me a lot when I was learning. Or I think it was the opposite. Like the official RxJS documentation has the diagrams, but this website had more examples. It's one of either.
Yes.
And to me, the combination of the official RxJS docs and this website, by the way, it's learnrxjs.io. I just checked. It, to me at
Okay.
least, was really helpful when I was learning RxJS in the beginning of my Angular journey. So I wonder, like, what do you think about that, and what worked for you? Like, how did you learn RxJS to get into a more advanced level?
Okay, so for me, I learned ArcGIS from various sources. I can't correctly remember the sources I learned it from, but it was various sources. Also, I just asked AI for some of the resources it can give me, and I also checked some websites, and then I used some of the operators. So I think I went on their official website too, and then I found most of the operators that were necessary to me. The ones I use the most are the map, the filter, and all those operators. Those are the ones I use the most. So I do think I would also check out the website you're also talking about to see how that can also help me in my journey learning RxJS. I think your mic is muted.
Sorry, you are correct. I do that so many times.
I
All right.
know, I understand.
Now, getting back to your article in particular, it says
Yes.
the top 17 RxJS operators. So, what
Yes.
are the top 17?
Okay, so there's the map operator, the filter operator, the tap do operator, there's the concat operator, there's the merge operator, there's the debounce time operator, there's the reduce operator, there's the retry operator, there's the concat map operator, there's the switch map operator, there's the partition operator, there's the combine latest operator, there's the skip operator, there's the so many I can go on and on. There's the take until operator, and then there's the catch error operator. It's muted again.
And out of those, are there any that you would consider more unknown-ish? Because I guess that at this point, at least map, um, filter, reduce are ones that are very straightforward for every Angular developer.
Yes.
I don't think that there are many Angular developers that are unfamiliar with those. But
Yes.
are there any that you would consider to be more interesting to talk more about?
I think like the concat operator is an operator that not a lot of people use, but it can be helpful to just merge two things together. So you can concat multiple observables sequentially emitting values together. I think that's an operator a lot of people don't use. And the debounce time is also an operator a lot of people don't use, but a lot of people use debounce timers for so many things. If someone is typing something in an input and is supposed to run a particular function and they don't want it to run every time the user puts in an input, they want to wait maybe some milliseconds before the function runs or the API runs again. They usually try to create the whole debounce thing themselves, but then there's an operator like the debounce time that makes that quite simple to do.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. And can you give me some examples of where to use those in practice for like real Angular applications?
Okay, so if you are getting some information based on a user inputs in a form, and a user is putting in something, let's say there's a search input. So whenever the user types in something, it's supposed to search for results for the user to click on. That's probably going to take them to.
Jason?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, now I can. But I
Okay,
lost
great.
a few of the last seconds.
Oh, so okay. So I was saying that if a user is typing in something in an input, and then whenever the user types in something, they're supposed to search for results and display it on the page in real time as the user types. Sometimes you wouldn't want the API to run every single time the user types in something. They could type in something and delete it later. So usually debounce timers are used to wait a little while till the key up till they used to wait a little while till the user stops typing for some time and then run the API. So that's a situation where the debounce time could be very helpful, so that you could just wait a while after the user stops typing and then run the API instead of running the API every single time the user types in a new letter.
Okay. Yeah. That is a very useful one, debounce. Which, by the way, I don't think we currently have a signal-based alternative for it yet. Like I'm
Yeah.
seeing more and more signal-based alternatives for things that we used to do with our XGS popping up. Recently,
Yes.
Angular 19 was released, and we got Resource API, which allows us to deal with asynchronous requests with signals. But
Yes.
we really don't yet have anything for debounce. Although there are like simple pure functions to handle it, like you could very easily
Yes.
just use Moldash and it would
Yes.
allow you to use debounce and you could wrap it into a signal. But we don't yet have anything like baked in into a signal API, which is Interesting. What else do we still need RxJS to do?
Yeah, so we can also retry. There's also this operator called retry. So if you are running an API that is supposed to run maybe when the user loads a page, this particular operator allows makes use of this API, and then it will retry it 3 times. And after it's done retrying it, then you can display a message. You can subscribe to that to it through a pipe, and then display a message after it retries like 3 times. So with a retry operator, if you could say it should retry like 3 times. So if the API fails the first time, you can retry the second time and then retry the third time. And then on the third try, you could display a message to the user for the user to know that the API failed or it didn't work.
Right. And for those scenarios, the operator that you would recommend is just pure retry.
Yeah, you can use retry. That's one of the operators over here you can use to get that result.
Okay. I think that retry is an interesting one, but at the same time, it's not very used. Like it seems like a
Yes.
very nice use case, but I don't think people in production a lot of times do that, like explicitly as retry cases
Yes.
for the logic, which
Yes.
they should. It makes sense to do so, but most people just don't. I think it also exposes an interesting nature of RxJS, which is the code observable approach, because if you look at the way that we use the retry operator, it's just so interesting that you can just have an observable and pipe and then pass retry, and it almost seems like, how does it retry? And because imagine that if it were a promise, you wouldn't be able to have a promise and then just do a just put that promise into a retry function, because the promise is just the execution of the thing. Whereas in this case, the observable is almost like a formula for how you're going to subscribe to something. So the retry operator actually has all the information necessary, not just to get the value of the current observable, but to use the observable as a formula and kind of like run it again if it fails. I don't know if I'm complicating too much my explanation, because it might be really tough for people that, especially in audio format, trying to hear me and understand what I mean. But perhaps
I
you
know,
have
right?
other examples for that.
Yes. So yeah, you could use it for an Ajax, and then just have the API you want to run, and then retry 3 times. I get what you're saying too, and a lot of people don't use it. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's definitely something to look into. It's one of the unused operators that people just brush over, and then they complicate the way they retry, and instead of just doing something like this.
Yeah. I think in this list, you also have the partition operator, which I find to be particularly interesting. I wouldn't say always useful, but it's interesting because I've seen cases where people do two filters. Like that, that's not specific to our XJS, by the way. It's just talking about arrays in
Yes.
general or any kind of iterators. I've seen people
Yes.
just filter for one case and then filter for the opposite case, just to have the two arrays, like one filter for the condition being true and another filter for the condition being false. And this is just duplicated computation unnecessarily. Like you're going through the entire array of elements twice, whereas you could just do it once. But most people don't even know
Exactly.
that there are pure functions to do that. So you don't have this natively baked into array
Yeah.
methods, But for example, Lodash exposes an array utility called partition, and it's the same thing with
Yes.
RxJS. So partition
Yes.
is almost like filter, but instead of giving you a single array, it gives you two arrays, one with all the elements that match the condition and another with all the elements that don't match it, which is can be pretty useful.
Yes,
Although,
it's
yeah,
pretty useful because there are so many cases where we have to filter out results from APIs, and we create so many filters, and sometimes it can be a lot of filters because you're trying to get so many different information and section them into different values. But then for this one, you're able to do two things at once and then get all the results you want.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I see the example they have on the article is it's pretty straightforward as well. Like you have a list of numbers
Yes,
and you want to separate
yes.
them between even
The
numbers and odd
evens
numbers.
and the odd numbers, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Mm, I once did it just to give an interesting example for the audience of how you can apply it. I once used that in a form submission because what I wanted to do is I wanted to check if any of the object properties were different from what they were before at the time of submission. So imagine that like you're editing something, but when you're submitting, the changes, then you want to see if there were any changes or not, because if there weren't any changes, then you don't have to um, then you can just let the person leave without telling
Yes,
them that there are unsafe changes, right?
yes,
And what I did was I used a partition function to separate which properties had changed from which ones hadn't. And then in the
yeah,
model of unsafe changes, I would show up like, hey, you have those X properties, and I would list the properties that had changed and said,
yes,
if you leave this page now, then those changes won't be saved. Do you
yeah,
want to save them before leaving, or do you want to go ahead and discard the changes? But even
yeah,
if they saved, I would still have to access all properties, even the ones that weren't that hadn't changed, because the endpoint was a put, not a patch. So I had to give
yeah,
the entire object to update. So in this case, like I did this, so I wouldn't have to have two operations, one to get just the unchanged properties and another to get the changed ones. I would just get all of them, but also I would have a way to
yes.
have some separation when necessary,
Separation,
but
yes.
also when necessary, I would be able to just use all of them.
Exactly. That's great. That's a great use of the partition. That's even a very creative way of using it than the simpler way people would even think about it. That's actually a very creative way of using it.
Yeah, thanks. All right, what else? Let me take a look here. We have catch error, which it's kind of straightforward. Who else? I think concat map is interesting because I think concat and merge in general are interesting because so many people get confused about the difference between concat and merge. So perhaps you could talk a bit about that.
Okay, so for the concat, it just helps you flatten observable sequentially, and it's quite helpful because when a user clicks on something, you could you could perform a concat map, and then you could wait a particular time, and then just combine different values based on what they've put in.
So yeah, that is correct. But just to simplify a bit for the audience, um,
Yes,
both concat and merge allow you to aggregate multiple observables into a single one. The difference is
yes,
that merge aggregates them in parallel. So imagine that you have multiple observables happening at the same time, and when you merge them, you get an observable that has all the events of the observables that you aggregated at the moment that they happen. So let's say that you have a timer that happens every 1 second and another that happens every half a second. Then you would get a new observable that emits every half a second and also emits twice every second. But on the other hand, concat is different because concat aggregates the observables in serial order. So it's not going to output the values in parallel. It's going to output all the values from the first observable until that observable completes. And then it
Yes.
starts to, and then it emits the values from the second observable until it completes, and then the
Yes.
third. So the difference is just whether you're aggregating things in serial order or in parallel
Yes.
order.
Yes. So it waits for the inner observable to finish before moving on to the next value.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, man, that is, I think, most of it. Like the only other one that we haven't touched is just tap, which I also think that most people will be familiar with that. But for those that aren't, it's
Yes.
basically like map, but you discard the result. So it's just for
Yes.
side effects like logging or basically doing something with the value, but not necessarily caring about what the function returns.
Yes. So it
Okay.
doesn't alter the actual value.
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Jason, on this subject or RxJS, is there anything else that you think would be relevant to discuss with the audience, or should we start wrapping up?
I would just say that there are definitely more operators that are not in the top 17 that we could always get into and know. Most of the ones I use are over here, and whenever there's something that you feel is complicated, you could just search for RxJS or Ludash or any of these tools to help you out, simplify certain things that would usually be complicated to do. And I think that's it.
Okay. All right. All right. Jason, let's do some quick promos. So on my
Okay.
end, I'm just going to promote the two companies that produce this show. So if you are listening to this and you're interested in learning other technologies, not just Angular, then Top End Devs has many other shows as well. There's a show about React called React Roundup, and shows about continuous integration, continuous deployment, just JavaScript in general. There are a lot of podcasts. So do check out Top End Devs if you're interested in that. And if you are a business owner or if you are at a company that is currently looking for remote developers, I would definitely recommend checking out Unvoid.com. So this is unvoid.com because they have a very unique proposition, which basically allows you to hire them and only pay for the tasks that they deliver, which is a lot more client friendly than paying by the hour or hiring on a full-time employee and then paying a monthly value. So it's very different, but definitely check out if you're interested in that. That's unvoid.com. So how about you, Jason? What would you like to promote?
Okay, I'd just like to promote myself as a software engineer, full stack, front end, back end, mobile dev. If you have any projects, if you want any mentoring, if you also want to mentor, if you have anything you would like me to contribute to, work on, if you'd like to work with me, I'm available. You can check out my LinkedIn. It's Jason Akbar, and I'll be happy to connect with anybody that listens and is interested in having a conversation.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. Jason, thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure to have you, dude.
It was a
Good luck.
pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good luck on looking for your next opportunity. I hope it doesn't take too long. The market is a bit crazy at the moment, but
I
there's
know,
always
right?
space
I
for good
know.
talent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good luck to you too. And it was so much fun being on this podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee. Have a great day.
You too.